let's imagine President Museveni has left the seat today. Nope has been given power to take over the government. Where will they start? It's a given that change has to come. But do we need a change of a person, or do we need a change of a system? I confidently believe that we don't need a change of a person, we need a change of a system. I think government is actually willing to work with the opposition, but the opposition is not willing to work with government for obvious reasons. Guys, maybe President Museveni is not really bad after all. I know you want to come for me. Don't come for me. Let me explain. Let's look at the dichotomy of events in Uganda. So, on one side, we have His Excellency Robert Kyagulanyi, or Bobi Wine, who is currently the biggest or the most powerful member of the opposition. Let's forget about the rest of the people, but acknowledge the fact that we have a multi-party system functioning in Uganda. And then on the other end, we have President Museveni, who has been in power for 40 years, close to 40 years. Clearly, he's done what he's done, and now people are tired. We need change. So, picture a situation whereby a huge number of National Unity Platform members are captured by police and battered into the cells and arrested, even in cells, are still handcuffed. That's a very bad depiction of a government that is failing at maintaining order and what democracy speaks about: free speech and expression. And then on the other side of the border, picture a country where more than 100 youths have been arrested and are facing charges of treason, which are punishable by a death penalty. That means if really the law releases its wrath on these young people, Tanzania might actually have to lose more than 100 young people to cases of treason which are not even serious. One of which is a famous one of a Tanzanian socialite who was dancing to a meme that was created off of a speech given by Samia Suluhu, who is currently the president of Tanzania. Again, picture an election in Tanzania that was marred by a lot of violence, and where reports show that over 700 people, or even 1,000, have been killed. And videos have showed evidence to that effect. As if that's not enough, while the election was being prepared in Tanzania, almost all contending members of the opposition, like Tundu Lissu, who was the biggest contending member of the opposition, was actually jailed, leaving people that were barely competent enough to stand against Samia Suluhu. And then, at the end of the election, she was announced with 98% victory. That means that almost the entire population of Tanzania voted for her. But it has come out clearly from election observers that the elections were not free and fair. There was ballot stuffing and little participation from the public. That is that. Then you come back to Uganda. We have an opposition leader who is Robert Kyagulanyi. Of course, in Mbarara, for example, he was attacked by goons who were beating his supporters, and they were able to lodge that complaint to the Electoral Commission, which are currently investigating, Ugandan style of investigation. And then after that, the next day, as they were again on their campaign trail in the western part of Uganda, they were rounded off by police, similar style that happened in Kalangala that had quite a lot of people captured, including Olivia Lutaya, who was similarly arrested in 2021 in Kalangala. So imagine after that encounter, the members of opposition actually had the privilege or benefit of going to police to demand for the head count of people that were arrested, what condition they were in, upon which they discovered that majority of these people were actually in prison and still in handcuffs. That's a very horrible situation, because essentially when someone is in jail or in a prison cell, they don't have to be handcuffed. And after that is established, you come and hold a press conference, yes, and freely talk about how people have been mistreated, how the government is rogue, how the regime is basically stifling democracy and hamstringing members of the opposition into the corner so that they get agitated and push them into doing something that they don't really like. That is very bad. Now, we move on after the press conference, and then Sunday, Robert Kyagulanyi is captured on video with his wife, Babi Tungo, with a couple of other friends and supporters, including his brother, Dax Vibes. They are captured in a farm, exploring literally a big acreage of land that is, punctuated by healthy mango trees, bananas. And it shows you that people are actually living in a country where they are able to do things that add value onto themselves. They freely walk around, eat these mangoes, breathe this fresh air, under a leadership that is being depicted as a dictatorship. And then, shortly after that depiction of events, President Robert Kyagulanyi comes up with this video right here. I need you to watch and listen.
Hi, this is Bobi Wine reaching you from Tongamo. I'm sure many of us are shocked in Kenya and in Uganda, the abduction of our brothers, Bob Njagi and Nicholas Oyo, who were abducted by Ugandan security forces, and when demanded for them, the Uganda police denied knowledge of them, the military in Uganda denied knowledge of them, even the habeas corpus, which was put in court, the court dismissed it, saying you cannot squeeze blood out of stones. So, clearly, the Uganda police, the Uganda military, and the Uganda judiciary denied that there was any abduction in Uganda. Just yesterday, the world was shocked when General Museveni came out to actually admit that the security forces in Uganda abducted Bob Njagi and Nicholas Oyo, the two Kenyan comrades, and they were kept in a fridge. Now, by fridge, he meant those torture chambers where they strip people naked, torture them, and leave them in ice or in very cold rooms. It's very unfortunate. That is shocking. But yes, that is the reality in Uganda. Abductions are the order of the day. As we stand right now, a young man called Mugumya from this region was abducted, is still missing. 18 of our comrades were abducted and they're still missing. Just the other day, we buried Comrade Chiwalama's wife. The husband has been missing for close to 7 years. That's the situation in Uganda. That is why we are fighting. That is why we want to change, to remove this regime and restore human rights, restore democracy, restore security and safety and guarantee of human dignity. We intend to strip the president of the powers to appoint judges, of the powers to appoint the Electoral Commission, and to ensure that we have an independent judiciary. The judiciary in Uganda is in the pocket of the president, where the courts don't work, regardless of where you go. Courts don't work, no institution works. This should be a wake-up call to all of us, not only Ugandans, but even our brothers and sisters from all over East Africa and Africa. Now, these are two Kenyan citizens that were abducted and were missing for 37 days.
This 2 minutes video, for the record, was of course recorded in Babi Tungo's ancestral home in the western part of Uganda, because clearly Bobi Wine's wife is born in the western part of Uganda. Well, as far as my knowledge serves me, from the time Bobi Wine made this video, I've not heard of news of his abduction or his torture or his arrest because of the video he has made. Truth be told, ladies and gentlemen, our government, Uganda, is not perfect. President Museveni is not perfect. I want to agree. He's not perfect. And at the point where he is right now, I want to think that he has literally lost control of all the institutions, whereby the institutions have lost so much power that all the power actually revolves around him. And because of that, things are falling apart. Institutions have weakened, service delivery is poor, and people are not being served as they should be served. And this is due to the fact that, when a leader stays in power for a long period of time, oftentimes they begin to think that they are the solution to the problems of the nation. That's why they keep extending time. And that has been the case with President Museveni. And if you can tell from the previous one of his, during the manifesto launch, he said the same thing, that he was asking for more time to be able to finish that which he has not done. That clearly gives you the impression that the man thinks that he is the only person that can fix the problems of Uganda, which is actually not the case. Essentially, he should have resigned long time ago. But because of overstaying in power and thinking that you're the only solution to the problem, you'll tamper with the constitution. That's why the term limits were taken away. And now the country is being, honestly speaking, is being run with impunity, whereby the laws do not entirely act on the people that are committing crimes. That's why there are high rates of corruption, poor health care, poor quality education, poor service amenities. That's why you see there's load shedding. There is poor health care. There is bad education. And no one is brought to account. Do you know why? Because institutions have lost the power to hold individuals to account. That's fair enough to front as some of the reasons why this government should actually be changed. But the question is it that bad? Sit down and ask yourself. Let's imagine President Museveni has left the seat today. Nope has been given power to take over the government. Where will they start? That's the question. It's easy for us to yearn for change, but we need to ask ourselves, at what cost are we yearning for change? Is it at the cost of paying a price of violence, death, and instability, or a cost of where we allow a system that can be revamped, create a system that is slowly revamped or designed to empower institutions and take away any possibility of a violent transition of power? Because that's what I think in this instance, that the problem is not President Museveni. That's why I actually say that President Museveni is not bad at all. But the problem is the system in place. That's why the system needs, before we talk about President Museveni leaving, let's talk about how the system can actually be changed. Let's talk about how institutions can actually be changed. But however, the question again is, how can we change the system with a leader that has been in power for 40 years? That's an interesting question. But again, do you think President Museveni is that bad? I need you to share with me your thoughts on how do you think we can actually transition into a government that has better systems without dismantling that which that has already been built over a period of 40 years. Because I'll tell you for free that yes, Uganda has its problems, but we are way better than a lot of nations right now. You don't want what happened in Tanzania to happen in Uganda, because there is much potential in our security organizations to do exactly that to us. It's a given that change has to come. But do we need a change of a person, or do we need a change of a system? That's the question. Because from where I sit, I confidently believe that we don't need a change of a person, we need a change of a system. And how can this be changed? If only our government could allow a sharing of power where the opposition, somebody from the opposition could come in a position of prime minister. Let's say Bobi Wine gets into a position of prime minister, or Mugisha Muntu gets in position of prime minister, and then work together with the government of President Museveni. I believe systems can change so well so that we can begin to experience a new dawn of leadership in Uganda, just like it was in Kenya. But the question is the opposition willing to work with government? Or is government willing to work with the opposition? From where I sit, I think government is actually willing to work with the opposition, but the opposition is not willing to work with government for obvious reasons. That being in the opposition is obviously a gig, that it's a milk cow, like it's a cash cow that these people are using to cash into the government, to cash into their pockets, because we all know that there is that fund that is given to the opposition parties that is over 1 billion shillings What is that used for? Of course, nope is building branches and stuff like that, but what if they decided that we can work together and still keep the money coming for the opposition? Structures that allow money to go into their pockets remain, but efforts to work onto the system, to work on a system that will help bring in peaceful transition of power, but proper service delivery into a nation and quality leadership are put in motion. I think that's what is supposed to be done. Those projects that are supposed to ensure that there's proper systems in place that ensure and guarantee service delivery, power given back to the institutions, and presidential power limited, like Bobi Wine said in his constitution, in his manifesto. I think that's where we need to start moving towards. That's the conversation that we should be having right now. Because from where I sit, I don't think President Museveni is that bad at all. He's bad, but not that bad, really. We can still work with him. But on the other hand, should we be applauding President Museveni for being a fair leader or good after all? I don't think we shouldn't. We should be applauding him for that, because good governance should be able to give citizens a good quality life, their rights to express themselves, their rights to demonstrate, rights to good economic environment, good quality public amenities, especially when it comes to the fact that Ugandans pay taxes, so we deserve to have the highest quality. And therefore, we should not be giving President Museveni credit for the fact that despite the fact that there are certain things that have failed, at least we can count a few wins. No, we shouldn't be. I want to think that leadership to a certain extent should be holistic. There's a benefit of doubt, yes, but there's need for a leadership to serve a bigger interest of the people, which is currently not the case, because a small group of people is being served to a larger extent, while the larger group of people is being served to a smaller extent. But why are we saying that President Museveni is good after all? We are counting our gains. We are counting our blessings based off of what we've known African leaders to be, especially when they overstay in power. What we're experiencing in Uganda, despite President Museveni's 40 years of rule, is something that, to some extent, is something that is endurable. You have peace. You have, to some extent, you can express yourself. Abductions happen, like His Excellency Bobi Wine says, but not to a larger extent. But they are happening. Not to the extent it's happening in Tanzania currently. Expression of ideas is not curtailed like it is done in Tanzania. Last time I checked, when there are serious demonstrations in Uganda, when Ugandans were trying to, curtail the swearing, President Museveni, you had 56 people lost their lives. Or I think 56 or more than 50 people actually lost their lives. But if you look at what has happened in Tanzania, more than 1,000 people have died. So I'm not saying that we should be content with the situation that we're in, but I'm saying that while we understand the fact that this leadership has actually failed to deliver to the people, let's count the blessings, but also carefully curate how well we can stay peaceful, but also while devising a solution to the problems that we have, upon which I recommended sharing of power, because that's the only thing that can happen. But how? Share your ideas in the comment section and let me know. My name is Francis, and this has been The Update. See you.